You win by 40. You win by 40. You lose by 40. It's a routine weekend in the NBA when you win by 40 and lose by 40. Maybe not so much, but Keyonte and Walker continue to thrive. We're touching on it on a rare midday live edition of Locked On Jazz. Bum 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 bum.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked On Jazz. It is your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. We are free on all podcasting apps. We are free on YouTube, and we have a daily newsletter called Locked On Jazz that's free for you as well. Go to lockedondaily.com and sign up for the free newsletter. Special live edition. We don't usually do this. We had an internet outage in the house today. I'll explain in a second. So I'm doing a live edition of the show. We didn't pay our bill. Somehow we didn't pay our bill. I literally got home last night. I'm explaining now. I got home last night. I was unpacking at 2 o'clock in the morning, 1:45. I told my friend, the speaker that talks, plays Wild Rivers. He said, "You am not connected to the internet." I was like, "Well, I'll deal with that in the morning." I did all the man things, like you go and you unplug and plug in and reroute and act like you know what you're doing, and none of it worked. Forgot to pay a bill. Yeah, I don't know how it happened. No big deal. But it did mean I had no internet. So kind of funny, just being totally truthful about it. And man, I couldn't get a show out, couldn't get a newsletter out. So now we're doing the show live today, a little different. Here's what I got today. Trends, we always close Mondays with Trends Monday. So we'll do that for you. We will, I want to give a tip of the hat to the front office on something that I don't think anyone else is going to give him a tip of the hat on. And then I want to talk about Walker and Key, but we'll talk about the 40-point win and the 40-point losses. Is there any lesson to be learned from the two of them? Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start your season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started on $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Special hello to the Instagram audience. We don't go live on Insta very often, but thought we would at least for a while today. Not sure if we're doing the whole show live or just part of the show. And special hello to those of you who are watching live midday in a non-normal time. So appreciate it to the everydayers out there that are doing that. All right. The Jazz win by 40 in Portland. One of the biggest wins in franchise history, actually. And what jumps out in that game are three things: defensive physicality, connectivity, and consistent thrust of effort. In those three things throughout that ballgame. And we'll dig into it. What stands out in the loss to Sacramento is a little less thrust defensively. But frankly, with Sacramento was unbelievable shooting. Their effective field goal percentage was, I think, 68% by the time it was over. Their offensive rating was a 140. They shot 20 of 35 on mid-range shots. Their 13 of 32 from three wasn't crazy. They made a ton of shots. It wasn't one of those disastrous Jazz nights where, like, oh my gosh, the other team's in transition 30% of the time on our 25 turnovers or something horrendous. They weren't. They were in transition 18% of the time. And maybe what jumps out is that they were in transition only 7% of the time in the first quarter, and they eventually got there. In fact, what jumps out to me most about that is I thought the Jazz really played a pretty good defensive first quarter, which is continuing the trend of the Jazz playing really good first quarters. They trailed at the end of the first quarter last night, but the Jazz have now kind of consistently now for about 10 games been, I think it was in 6 of the prior 8, they were either tied or ahead. they were behind at the end as they went to the bench. Things got a little loose. But for the most part, they were really pretty good in that first quarter, and then it really fell apart in the second quarter. And the Jazz offense was horrendous in that game. Same way Portland's offense was horrendous. And I actually think that would be my one tie-in. The easy way on these two games is to go the other way and talk about, like, we made a bunch of shots, which the Jazz did too, by the way. The Jazz in Portland were pretty awesome getting to the rim. They were 24-35 at the rim. They weren't, like, insane from three or anything, but they were pretty good. But Portland's offensive rating that night was a 90. And the Jazz offensive rating last night was probably close to a 90. At some point, I'm going to go the other way on this one, which is it's not so much that the other teams made a bunch of plays and they hit a bunch of shots. It's that at some point in a game, when your offense sucks and you cannot get it together offensively, you wilt. And I thought Portland wilted. DeAndre Ayton wilted early. And at some point last night, the Jazz wilted defensively. Like, the numbers last night on Sacramento quarter by quarter are insane of what they started to do shooting wise. And to some extent, to me, that's one, that they were hot. Two, that you, like, I wilted. I'm going to go with that word. You wilted. You just wilted to me is that the heat got to be too much and you just couldn't go. In the first quarter, the Jazz were fine. They had a defensive rating of 100 last night. It was really impressive. They stayed with it. They only had an offensive rating of 85. It wasn't great. In the second quarter, the Jazz offensive rating was 100 again, which is really bad. The league average is like 115, and Sacramento's was a 164. And then in the third quarter, Sacramento's offensive rating was a 153, and the Jazz was a 107. You only for so long can you do that. And then the fourth quarter, Doug McDermott, of all weird things, went nuts, and their offensive rating was a 160. Their offensive rating from the first to the third quarter last night was a 160. So, I mean, that's pretty horrendous defensively if you want to be totally honest about it. But it's also our offense just couldn't hang. And at some point, you will. And that's what Portland did a few nights earlier against us, is that the Jazz were playing really well. They're doing a bunch of things really well. They deserve credit. That we pushed the ball. We played ahead. We got rolling off out in front off their misses. We did a bunch of things really, really well. But I also think, like, Portland couldn't score and they wilted. Portland had a 95 offensive rating in that game. Their first quarter, their offensive rating of that game was a 74. The Jazz killed them in the first quarter. In the second quarter, their offensive rating was like a 104. And then in the third quarter, they just wilted, and it was a 96, and the Jazz put a 130 on them offensively, and the Jazz just kept pummeling them. Like, at some point in this league, if you can't score, the other stuff is just too hard. And that's why you win by 40 and lose by 40 in a span of 48 hours. There's no big statement to me, and I'm actually going the opposite way of just making shots. It's actually the not making shots that jumps out to me in this. I do think the Jazz in Portland, ball movement was great. I actually think there's a post-Oklahoma City theory to this one I've got for you. I'll share with you in a second. They pushed the ball ahead. They had great energy early. Keyonte's defensive pressure was terrific. And it was fabulous. Here's my Oklahoma City theory. There's a great book by Daniel Coyle called Talent Code. And he goes into these pockets of the world that have all the greatest talent. So he goes into, like, this little tiny Russian village that has all the best violinists, and all the best Brazilian soccer players come from a place that doesn't even have a soccer field. And the best skateboarders all came from Southern California at the same time. And how come this happens? And his thesis is that there was something that was happening in that environment that allowed their myelin, their connectivity, like your broadband of your body, to be intensified at such a level. So for the soccer players in Brazil, they actually played a game with a little tiny ball in alleyways, very little space. And then when they would get out to the space of soccer, their myelin had been developed so much, their broadband was so fast that they would get in this space and be incredible. And if you go to the skateboarders of the reason the skateboarders all came out of Southern California at the same time is there was a drought and there was a real estate recession. And so swimming houses were abandoned and swimming pools were drained. And so these kids were playing in swimming pools, which is much harder than a skate park. And that's how the Tony Hawks of the world became great. That's the theory of this book. I actually think there's something to playing Oklahoma City that the next game seems so easy. Like Oklahoma City just kicked the crap out of us, much more than Sacramento. Sacramento just hit a bunch of shots. Sacramento's really good. Their offense was rolling. Kevin Huerter got going. They hit a ton of shots. But the fact of the matter is Oklahoma City's hard to play. Oklahoma City, like I remember my kids ski racing, and every now and then they would have a super hard day of training on CBs over here at Park City, which was icy and hard and death-defying and scary, and it's the Olympic run. And then they would go have a race at Brighton, and they'd be unbelievable. And I actually think I'd be really curious to see what happens with teams who play their second game after Oklahoma City. Like in the NFL, you play that team, they beat the physical crap out of you. You're so sore, you play terribly. But in the NBA, I think there's something to if you play Oklahoma City and they're up in your shorts and they're long and they're bothering you the whole night, and then you get out and you're playing Portland and Portland's letting you run your stuff. You're like, wee, this is so fun. And then you win by 40. And Andy Larson had this crazy note in his triple team, and he mentioned to Will Hardy in the press conference that like the Jazz are 2-13 in the history of the franchise after a 40-point win. Well, your next time out, you're like, wee, oh, uh-oh. And I actually think there's something to that took place in all of this. I really, really like what I'm seeing out of Keyonte George. My eye test says yes, so it does about Walker Kessler. We'll talk about it a lot this week, but we're going to talk about it next. I also love a little technique by Will Hardy, and I think that the front office deserves some credit for the veterans. Those are all on the docket coming up here. If you've got any questions, you can throw them in. We don't usually take questions on shows because we don't usually do live shows. So this is all a little different. It's coming up as we continue on Locked On Jazz. Today's show is brought to you by Murdoch Chevy, located in Woods Cross, also in Logan. The Chevy truck, Americana, the Murdochs, Utah. It's the perfect combination for you. If you're looking for a truck right now, the Chevrolet and the Chevy truck, the Silverado, and the Colorado are absolutely fantastic. The Silverado's the bigger King Poobah power, boom, feeling like you're riding above the road. The Colorado's the zippier, smaller, get things done truck for you. So go grab either one of those, plus a great lineup of SUVs over at Murdoch Chevy, located in Woods Cross, right off the freeway, also located in Logan. If you're going to stop by, email me first at dlock09@gmail.com. That's dlock09@gmail.com to make sure that you get your VIP experience over at Murdoch Hyundai. Also a great lineup of SUVs going on right now. So if you want to check all that out, again, email me first so I can give you your VIP experience over at Murdoch Chevy, located in Woods Cross, also located for you in Logan. Check it out today. Great time to get in the market for your trucks and all the other items along the way. That is Murdoch Chevy. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at Mint Mobile. Mint Mobile is this cellular company for you that is not playing the game that everyone else is. You know, our good friend. I mean, like he and I are super close, me and Ryan Reynolds. Yeah, super, super close. Okay, maybe not that close. Here, big wireless providers. What you see is never what you get. So somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotcha ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month with a purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. So say bye-bye to overpriced wireless plan and jaw-dropping monthly bills, unexpected outages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data, unlimited talk, text delivered on the largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number with you, all along with existing contracts. Ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless for $15. To get the new customer offer, your new 3-month premium wireless plan for $15, go to mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. That's mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. Cut your wireless plan to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. $45 upfront payment required. New customers on first 3 months plan, speeds slower than 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions. See Mint Mobile for details. Thanks so much for tuning in to Locked On Jazz today. Live edition, both on Instagram at DLock09. You can follow me on all of the various follows. Blue Sky, Threads, X, TikTok, Instagram. It's DLock09 on all of them. So thanks very much for taking the time to join me live on the show today. Throw any comments you might have in the comment section if you want to jump one in as well. We have a daily newsletter for you. It's awesome. It's the ultimate one-stop NBA newsletter. It has the national articles of Katie Heindel. Mike Schreier comes on Thursdays. It has the Josh Lloyd exclusive fantasy tips. It also gives you your local Jazz stuff, all the links to the most important stories of the NBA. Go to LockedOnDaily.com and subscribe. I really, maybe the most excited I've been in his young career about what I'm seeing out of a young, developing Keyonte George. Let me say the first thing about Keyonte and Walker. And this is probably going to fall on relatively unsympathetic ears because it's hard for us to see someone play a kid's game, make millions of dollars, and have sympathy for the life. But the biggest thing that I see having kids the exact same age as Keyonte George and Walker Kessler is I'm watching them try to figure out how to navigate this life. And honestly, it's not that great. Like, they make a lot of money and they get to play a kid's game, but it's super hard at this age. I know what's hard. Okay. I'm going to stop with the caveats and just accept it for what I'm talking about. And if you want to be Debbie Downer and say this is stupid, they're making millions, fine, be that guy or that woman. But the fact of the matter is, trying to be a 20 or 21-year-old or 22-year-old in the spotlight of the NBA in a non-natural development setting with pressure on you every day, playing against LeBron James and the best of the world is super hard. And trying to figure out how to enjoy it is harder. And trying to figure out how to get better is even harder. And how to not feel like a failure and crack is even harder. And what I'm seeing, regardless of basketball, out of both Walker Kessler and Keyonte George, and we'll talk about basketball, but what I'm seeing out of these two guys right now is they are learning how to navigate life in the NBA. I thought Will Hardy said it well last night. He said after the game, Keyonte's playing with a level of joy. I've told this story a lot. Walker Kessler to me last year looked miserable. Walker Kessler is 364 days older than my son. They're the exact same age. And last fall, my son was abroad taking college classes, living in Copenhagen and traveling Europe with his friends. And God only knows what he was doing on weekends. And I don't actually care because that's what you're supposed to be doing at 20 and 21 and 22 years old. And Walker was living under this undenying pressure of getting benched for maybe doing nothing and being asked to do more and not getting better and the game being hard and getting physically killed every night and being told he was a failure by the world around him. And he looked miserable. Not to mention, like, if you want to get into socially, and I don't know this for a fact, but I'm going to guess Walker hasn't made a friend in 2 years. And I'm going to guess Keyonte hasn't made a friend in 2 years, unless a teammate counts or somebody in the league. It's not normal. It's not normal to have $3 million at 20 years old. It's not normal to play in front of 18,000 people at 20 years old. It's not normal to have 2 million people with their little phones tapping and telling you how much you suck at 20 years old. It's not normal. And therefore, it's hard. It's a non-natural development process. And what I'm seeing out of both Walker Kessler and Keyonte George this right now is them learning how to navigate being an NBA player and how to enjoy it. And if you don't enjoy it, I don't think you can be good. If it's a burden to go to the arena, I don't think you can be good. And trust me, it was a burden to go to the arena for Walker Kessler last year. I don't know if he'd totally agree with the way I phrased that. I'm going to stick to it. And if Walker told me I was lying, I'd tell Walker he's lying. Not in an argumentative way. I love Walker. You know why I like Walker? Because he's 364 days off the age of my son. I look at him like he's my, I literally look at these. I'm having the best time as a reporter and as someone covering this team because I now look at these kids as they're my kids. And it makes me understand them way more. I was talking to Bryce Sensabaugh the other day about a hysterical conversation we had a year ago where we're in Oklahoma City and we were talking about, and I was like, he was like 4 of his last 30 from the field. And I was dead set on not talking to him at all for 1 second about his shooting. They had gone through an interesting drill where you were doing something counterintuitive defensively, and how hard was it to learn, and this and that. And all Bryce could do is bring the conversation back to his shooting. And I joked with him about it just the other day. I'm like, I do this with my kids all the time. Like, I'll call my kid and talk to them about everything else, and they'll bring up the one thing they're worried about. Yeah, they're 20. They don't know that they're going to get through all these things and be fine. And frankly, there might be a level where the losing right now is good for them. Not because it's enjoyable, they hate it, but because it takes a little of the edge off and lets them develop. And my eye test right now on both Keyonte George and Walker Kessler is great. Keyonte is playing a calm basketball game. That is what Will already called it joyful. I would call it calm. Are the numbers obvious? No, there's a 1 of 8 against Dallas. And actually that night I didn't think he was calm because he's playing Dallas and he looked to me like he was frenetic playing his hometown team. Oklahoma City, he got physically manhandled at the time, but I actually thought that he played all right. Portland, he was great. Will Hardy thought the open of this game, ball defense, getting ball pressure, being on it against Portland was as good as he's ever seen. Other coaches said the same thing to me on the plane and talking things. He's boarding a little bit. He's getting an extra rebound or 2 that he didn't used to get. He's getting to the free throw line. Look at this. He's getting to the free throw line 6 times last night. Third highest of the season. Love what I'm seeing out of him, but not all the numbers. It's my instinct to go back to numbers. But when I'm talking about him right now, what I really see is a guy who's just playing the game without pressure, without stress. He's really talented, letting his talent hold. It's the same thing I'm seeing out of Walker. These guys are so gifted and so good, and yet outmanned every night. It's crazy. They're so good. They're amazing. They're getting paid buku bucks, and every night they're outmanned. Right? Be honest about it. De'Aaron Fox, Keyonte George. Oh, that's not close. Domantas Sabonis, Walker Kessler. Oh, that's not close. Right? DeAndre Ayton, Walker Kessler's not close, and Walker Kessler kicked his ass because he didn't try. Nikola Jokic, Walker Kessler. The bigs in this league are so good. Did you see what Gogo Bakazi did last night? Guys you don't even think are good. You don't even know who he plays for. I'm going to guess that most of you don't know who Goga plays for anymore. I don't blame you. You shouldn't. I should. It's my job. He had 21 points, 16 rebounds, and 4 assists last night for Orlando in a win over Phoenix. Mason Plumlee's the other big. Okay. But that's how good everyone is right now. It's kind of incredible. I am super impressed by 3 mundane moves the Jazz front office made in the offseason, and we'll do Trends Monday as well as we continue on a afternoon edition of Locked on Jazz. Today's edition of Locked on Jazz is brought to you by the official sportsbook of Locked On, the official sportsbook of the NFL. It's FanDuel. Get into the action with the America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel, all the NFL, all the NBA. And right now, new customers can bet up to $5. You get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, give you live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page when you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started for $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more. The official sportsbook of Locked On, the official sportsbook of the NFL. I am super curious on the odds on the NBA Cup. So Milwaukee is now a 7.5-point favorite over Orlando, who will be without Banchero and Wagner. Oklahoma City's a 4.5-point favorite over Dallas. That's going to be a great game. The Knicks are a 7.5-point favorite over Atlanta, and Golden State. Houston's a 2.5-point favorite over Houston. So that means, if you're following that, they believe that the Milwaukee will play New York and Oklahoma City will play Houston in the matchups in Vegas for the NBA Cup. It's kind of cool. The odds-on favorite to win the NBA Cup is Oklahoma City at plus 280, Knicks at plus 310, Milwaukee at plus 450, Dallas at plus 750. I cannot give you my thoughts on that in any way, shape, or form because I am an employee of the NBA. So I will leave that for you to do. That's all at FanDuel.com. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps. Thank you for those who tuned in live on YouTube or on Instagram as well. We can talk more about this week. We had lots of time. I'm just really impressed by Svi Mykhailiuk, Patty Mills, and Drew Eubanks. They're kind of perfect signings for who we are, where we are. You know, we're not trying to win a ton of games. That's clear. We're trying to develop our players. So these guys set the tone. They're total pros. They're ready to go whenever they need to be. They can come in and play, and they're not really going to steal anyone's minutes. But they can give you everything you might need. It's kind of cool. Really, for the front office, to give them credit for a second, that's exactly what you should be signing. What Svi did on Friday, can play when Lowry's out, but also has been a great practice player every day, never causing a problem, and you know he's going to play hard. Perfect. Patty Mills does everything from help coach to run with the coaches in practice to sit and play 20 minutes if you need him. And Drew Eubanks is part of the rotation right now as a backup center because we're thin there. And it turned out that moving John Collins to the 4 turned out to be a better idea. It's really good signings. It's a really good understanding of who we are and what we needed at the time. So tip of the hat. All right. Let's go to our Monday Trends Monday. We always look at the last 10 games, and then we look at the last 2 weeks. So starting the last 10 games, the hottest team in the league is the Dallas Mavericks. And the second hottest team is the Memphis Grizzlies. And the third hottest team is the Oklahoma City Thunder, which makes that Dallas-Oklahoma City game maybe the NBA Cup championship game in the first round. All right. Some interesting things here. Dallas is a plus 11.8. Memphis is a plus 11.6. Memphis is in transition more than anyone else alive. They're playing faster than everyone else. They're doing some neat stuff. They're assisting on 68% of their field goals in the last 10 days. They're doing some neat things. Interesting to watch. I've kind of dug into Memphis a little bit to try to figure out what's going on. Oklahoma City, New York, Boston, Miami has clicked in. They're getting healthy. Tyler Hero's having an all-star year. Really good talk about that last night on Locked On NBA or today on the game night edition with Wes and Swipa. So there, the teams in the bottom 10 are Washington, Portland, New Orleans, Lakers, and the Jazz. You lose by 40, you show up in the bottom 10. But if you win by 40, you shouldn't. But the Lakers, losers of 7 of 10, are in the bottom of the NBA for the last 10 games. Best offenses in the league, the Knicks are 1, Dallas 2, Memphis is 3, Chicago is 4, Boston is 5, Milwaukee is 6. That's where Milwaukee should be. Worst offenses in the league right now are Washington, New Orleans, Portland, Lakers, Golden State, and Charlotte. Best defense in the NBA over the last 10 games, this is important, is Minnesota. They've clicked back in defensively. They lost a game they shouldn't have lost. Anthony Edwards looked awful last night. We'll do it tomorrow on Late Game Watch. But they are the number 1 defense in the NBA over the last 10 games, which is important because that means they've clicked back in. Houston, the Clippers continue. Oklahoma City, Golden State, Orlando, Memphis are there. Worst defenses in the league the last 10 games. Washington, Utah, Portland, Chicago, New Orleans, and Detroit. Not a big surprise. All right, let's go to the last 10 games. Or excuse me, the last 2 weeks. So a little smaller sample size and see what we get using cleaning the glass, which eliminates blowout time, which will mean that kind of the Jazz and Portland and Sacramento will be a little different than that. The hottest team in the NBA over the last 2 weeks is the New York Knicks, which is interesting going into NBA Cup play. Number 2 is Memphis. Number 3 is Oklahoma City. Number 4 is Dallas, who's 7-0. And number 5 is Boston. And number 6 is Minnesota. Teams that are on the bottom of that are Washington, Portland, New Orleans, Utah, Charlotte, and the Lakers, but also the Spurs, which really surprised me. Victor was out for some of that along the way. All right, top offense in the NBA over the last 2 weeks. New York is at a 126, which is pretty incredible. Dallas, Boston, Miami, healthy and clicked in. Oklahoma City, and then Sacramento, who we saw last night, really finally with Monk. Monk's gone in the starting lineup. It's helped him out a ton offensively. They, despite being 4-4, Washington, New Orleans, Charlotte, Golden State, Lakers, and Minnesota can't score right now. That's interesting. And Minnesota, that vibes with me. Watching their late game, and again, we'll talk about it tomorrow. Lakers also can't score right now. Golden State can't score right now. Top defensive teams, Minnesota again, Memphis. Minnesota, by the way, last 2 weeks is a 100 defensive rating. League average is a 113. The next best is Memphis at 105. Minnesota's really clicked in defensively. Philadelphia, Orlando, Oklahoma City, and Dallas. Pretty interesting that Dallas is there. Teams that are not defending: Portland, San Antonio, Washington, Utah, New Orleans, and Denver. Jokic carrying them, but not enough. All right, that is your Trends Monday. That is your Locked On Jazz. Thank you to all who tuned in on Instagram for a unique long show. Thank you to everybody who tuned in on YouTube live as well. And to our regular listeners, thank you for being in every day. You can follow me on all of the platforms: TikTok, Instagram, X, Threads, Blue Sky at DLock09. Please do. I greatly appreciate it. Follow the newsletter at LockedOnDaily.com. Sign up and get it in your inbox each and every day. And if you've not followed or subscribed to our program yet, please do on YouTube or whatever your podcast app is. This has been Locked On Jazz. We now send you over to the first ever 24/7 national NBA channel. Check out Locked On NBA, 2 shows, game night after all the games, and the good conversation with Doug Branson and the crew.